Buongiorno, buonasera, good afternoon. Questa sessione è una sessione in inglese, non è prevista traduzione simultanea. This would be an English language session, so there's no simultaneous translation available. Io tuttavia sono presente e quindi se serve per qualcuno un po' di aiuto tra l'italiano e l'inglese io posso dare una mano. So if anyone, by any chance I'm here, so I can help with some Italian to English questions, etc., if needs be. Welcome anyway. This is a session organized by the Online News Association in partnership with, of course, the International Journalism Festival. And we are partners with the festival since 2009. And I'm happy to introduce to you Josh Hatch, who is editor of Data and Interactives at the Chronicle of Higher Education, but he is also the vice president of the organization and the chair of its awards committee, since the organization organizes and manages the online journalism awards, and we thought it would be interesting to know more about this, and it's especially to show what others have been doing and projects that won in past years, and how can this how all of this can help to do better journalism in many different ways, and as we will see, in many different languages, not just English. So, without further ado, Joshua, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks. Well, thank you, Six, for coming. Hopefully others will come as well. And I have a very short presentation and talk a bit about what the OJAs are and what has made the winners of the OJAs special. How many of you are familiar already with the Online Journalism Awards? Okay, good. So Online Journalism Awards started in 2000, so this will be our 16th year of the awards. I've been running them for the last 3 years, I believe. So I'm going to talk a little bit, just very quick history of the Online Journalism Awards. I'll talk a little bit about how it's changed over the years, the different rules and categories, how we handle the judging process, what this year's awards looks like, and then get into, I think, probably the meat of the matter, which is what makes a winner. And then if there's any questions that you have, happy to take them. So the awards started in 2000. There were about 500 entries, I believe, across 11 categories. So those categories were things like breaking news, creative use of the medium. It was considered a relatively new platform in 2000. So what were the creative ways that people were taking advantage of online digital journalism? Enterprise journalism. These are, breaking news and enterprise are, exist in print and video and radio and online as well. And the idea at the time was to break them down into two sort of subgroups. Entries from organizations that were original to the web, had no other counterpart to television or to print, so they were purely original, and those done in collaboration with other media. So you can imagine a newspaper, for example, that had an online presentation. So the goal was to create separation between those two groups. This was one of the winners in 2000. This was in the service journalism category. It was called Choosing Nursing Homes, and it was done by Cleveland.com, which happens to be my hometown. And as you can see here, there is, this is not a fancy page. You can see a little bit that there's some sort of searchable database on this page, but this is definitely circa 2000. There's not much here that screams modern 2015 website. But yet, it still is an of the platform kind of thing, this idea that you can search for a nursing home and find how they're rated. And this was, I thought, a really good example of digital thinking even applied 15 years ago. Unfortunately, most of the pieces that date back to that time period, if you try and go to the pages of the winners, you get something like this. An overwhelming number of entries are no longer available, which is really quite sad. There's a lot of great work that's been done over the years that's now lost. Sites have changed, stuff's been taken down, and even really high quality award-winning content, and that's really unfortunate. So fast forward to last year. Last year we went from 500 entries in 2000 to nearly 1,100 entries last year. We had 33 categories, so 3 times as many categories, including things like investigative data journalism, technical innovation, recognizing that there are unique technical aspects to digital journalism and to the web, and innovations in visual storytelling. What are new ways you take advantage of the platform? And we'll talk a bit more about this in a moment. So last year, some of the winners included this one for Knight Award for Public Service. It was a Miami Herald investigation looking at, as the state of Florida cut back on child protective services, what happened. And if you look here on the right, on my left, your right, you can see some of the digital ways that this journalism was expressed online through database, like the one in 2000, video, commenting, right? This is something that 2000 was not really, news organizations weren't really thinking about the dialogue they could have with readers. Various resources, how it was responded in the community. This idea of continuing to drive the story forward as it generates a response in the community, and how it was done. In Seattle, there was this massive landslide where basically half a mountain sheared off and buried a town. It's known as the Oso landslide. And this is another winner. And the thing I want to draw your attention to, not only the big imagery and so on, but you begin to see some of the ways that online is being expressed through photo gallery, through interactivity, the ability to explore all the victims of the landslide, a before and after slider, so the interaction between how it looked before the slide and after. So that was another winner. But we'll get into more of this in a moment. Just as a point of background, we've more than doubled the entries. So I said we started about 500 in 2000. I don't have perfect records, but as best as I'm able to piece together, the progress has been something like this, and we had a really nice jump last year. And those categories have really changed over time. And the reason why these categories have changed and grown is as we've begun to better understand the realities that news organizations, or actually I should say even just news content creators, not even news organizations really, have changed. So I don't know how many different kinds of newsrooms are represented in the audience here, but I've worked for USA Today, which had 1,000 people, and I've worked for a place where I have fewer than 10. And the resources you have at those organizations vary greatly. So we started grouping organizations by size in 2002, recognizing that what the New York Times can do versus what the Perugia Press can do are not the same, and they shouldn't be evaluated in the same way. So it kind of held steady for a little while. We dropped that notion of organizations that were affiliated or not. We realized that was kind of a false distinction. And we also recognized that student journalists were doing tremendous work and needed to be honored as well. So we added student journalism. In 2005, we recognized that multimedia was something that needed to be added in, and so we did so. Bringing investigative in the year after. One of the things in other journalism contests, there's, I think, a clear, or has been a clear distinction between a news organization and other organizations that produce content. And one of the things that we realized online is that distinction was blurring. And that, for example, there's an organization called IEEE, which is an organization that does standards on electric devices. and they have a publication called IEEE Spectrum. And they were doing tremendous online journalism, but didn't really fit into traditional news organizations. And so we started creating these specialty categories. Continued to grow, we added the non-English awards because we weren't getting entries from outside North America, and we really wanted to encourage places, France and Italy and Spain and Russia and all over to enter. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that has progressed. Video was added, we got more and more categories. Community is something that started becoming big in around 2009, 2010. Technical innovation. So what are organizations doing to advance the platform? Not just the journalism, but things that make journalists more powerful online. Very, very small organizations, and how do we honor those? And then finally we realized we had so many categories, and we had so many different breakdowns and so many rules that we needed to simplify it. And so the non-English awards, for example, we started getting more entries, but we also started getting feedback like, hey, you're kind of putting us in a corner and segregating us, and we want to go up against the New York Times. We want to go up against everybody else. And so we dropped the non-English and said, okay, enter everything. We recognized that responding to every kind of media development was not a great idea, and it also didn't really represent the way that journalism was being done online. So no longer having a strict video category or a community category, but thinking, what's the broad journalistic categories, and how can video and multimedia and community be a part of every piece of journalism that's done? And so that just became a basic part of evaluating our content, our entries. So anyway, we continued to grow the number of entries. This year, after recognizing that last year we had the World Cup, and we had, what else was last year? There was another big event, I can't remember what it was, recognizing that we should have a sports category because there are going to be dozens of entries on the World Cup alone. So it has changed, and we've refined them over time and have grown them. On the international front, overall, last year we had entries from about 24 different countries. Over the course of the OJs, we've had our finalists have come from at least 100 different organizations, 100 different international finalists representing at least 50 different organizations, which is fabulous. At least 30 times international, that is to say a non-North American organization has won from at least 20 different organizations. So we feel we've made a lot of progress in getting more entries from around the world. All right, so some of the category and rule changes that we've done. I mentioned before, we really wanted to reflect the evolution of online journalism. Once upon a time, it was, the web was considered an easier way to distribute content. And now, 15 years on, we've, as an industry, recognized it as a different way to tell stories. And so how can we represent that evolution? So from digital being a separate thing in many places to being integrated and now being actually the primary way that news organizations are connecting with readers. Recognizing that different organizations have different resources, as I mentioned earlier. So we don't want to put the New York Times up against, two people trying to cover their neighborhood. New relationships among content creators. I mentioned IEEE Spectrum a moment ago, but also you've got places like ProPublica who often partner with other organizations, and thinking about how do we evaluate the work that ProPublica does when they partner with National Public Radio or the New York Times, and thinking about the right way to evaluate that and who to compare their content with. From sites having multiple media, here's our audio, here's our text, here's our video, to multimedia, where all the media are kind of together, maybe as a flash graphic, if you remember that, to things that are truly of the platform, where it's no longer a multimedia whole that's punched into the page, but the entire web page is a multimedia experience. Snowfall is a common example to give. And then being responsive to the changes without being reactionary. So one of the things I'm sure you're all familiar with has been the incredible transition from desktop to mobile. there was a time where we would have created some kind of new mobile journalism category. But that's not really appropriate. And instead, we adjust our categories, our rules, our definitions to talk about how entries should not only be, I think the word that somebody used was, oh gosh, I can't remember. It was a word I hadn't heard before, but how it needs to work across devices and across, from mobile to from desktop to tablet to mobile. And that's part of the criteria that we want to look at things by now. Okay, judging. Just if you're curious, we've evolved the judging as well, trying to figure out what works, especially as we get more entries, and especially as we get entries from around the world. So we have it in 2 phases. First, this year, we're going to have about 150 screeners who review the entries. If you want to be a screener, by the way, I have a sign-up page, and I'll give you the link in a moment. Come on in, more people.
Venite. Come on in.
Every entry we want screened by at least 3 people. And so that's just to give different perspectives, and everything gets looked at by different people. Sometimes, generally people are in agreement on an entry, but once in a while someone thinks this is fabulous, and another person thinks, not so much. And so getting several points of view on that really helps for fairness. What we do is we select, for each category, any entry in the top 80th percentile or higher moves on to the semifinal round. And then what we have about 12 to 16 judges. They meet together. In the past, that we've actually brought them physically together. We now do it online just because it's so hard to get 15 smart, talented, in-demand people to give up a couple of days to all meet.
Different part of the world.
Exactly, in different parts of the world. And somehow, for a while, we were meeting in Miami during hurricane season, and that didn't seem like a good idea. So now we meet online, and they pick the finalists and winners through that meeting. And this is what that screening process looks like. This is from last year. So we have a wide array of people from all over the country, from Germany, from Argentina, from New York, and the West Coast, and people who have a background in broadcast, and people who have a background in when I say a background, what I mean is maybe do digital work at a company that has a broadcast arm, or do digital work at a print arm, or are digital only, large organizations and small organizations and nonprofits. All the different ways we try and cover the spectra of diversity in organizations and everything. It's a lot harder than you might think, but I think we do a reasonable job of pulling people together. And you can tell they are in deep thought. So if you want to be a screener, you can sign up at this URL at bit.ly/OJA-sign up, and I invite you to do so. I'll let people take that in for a moment. Okay. All right, so now the fun part. The making of a winner. So I went back over the last 15 years, and I picked about a dozen or so examples of projects that I thought are worth discussing. So this was from 2001. Anybody remember when this happened? So the Concorde, as it was taking off from Paris, hit a piece of debris, I believe, and it punctured the fuel tank and caught fire. And it just so happened somebody was driving past and shot video of it out the window, which I find terrifying. This was a winner for breaking news back in 2001. Now, if you look at this page, it's not hard to look at it and maybe kind of smile a little bit, setting aside the content, and think, wow, that looks so old and antiquated. But there's a lot here that makes it a strong entry for the Online Journalism Awards. If we scroll down the page a little bit, you can see that they have a lot of context, a lot of resources, an interactive guide. They link to lots of other content and stories they have, not just on their site, but on other sites. Helplines, analysis, all these things that tie in, video, Even talking point, do you feel safe? So they're even engaging with the community. So they found a lot of ways to be of the platform rather than simply on it. This is not content that was created for some other venue and then just put online. This was really thinking about how they could take advantage of the relationship they have with readers, the different opportunities they have to connect with people through the digital platform. So I thought this was a really strong entry, even 13, 14, 15 years ago. Nice map. Okay. A couple years later, this was a small newspaper that sent a reporter to Malawi to do reporting on issues there. Much of what they did was actually built in Flash. You'll see that there's kind of this bell curve of Flash content in our awards. It doesn't exist.
There will probably people in the audience who don't know what Flash is.
How many of you don't know what Flash is? One. Okay, Flash was two. Flash was a product created by Adobe that allowed you to build interactive multimedia, audio, photo, video, text, animation, and it was a way to bring interactivity into a page, but it kind of was punched out of the page, and you had like a little window that would fit into, or would open up into its own small pop-up window. And Steve Jobs basically killed it. When he released the iPhone, he said the iPhone won't support Flash, and that basically killed Flash, more or less. But in any event, there was this, and you had special kind of programmers, and there was a programming language that was loosely based on JavaScript called ActionScript. In any event, there's like this bell curve on our awards where no Flash, everything in Flash, and then it died away, and now there's no Flash again. Anyway, this was a Flash package, and the thing that was really great about this, again, is all of this was kind of the height of nonlinear storytelling. And so here are a lot of different pieces sort of structured together in interesting ways. So the way they told the story, it wasn't just this linear narrative of individuals or this reporter's trip, but it was, here's a look at Malawi through the problems it's having. But then here's another one looking at the sort of affirmation of the people who live there and are making life work. So it was a very interesting piece that brought together, as you can see here, maps, and you could click through these and it would take you to different parts of the story. This was from 2005 from Slate, and there's one in enterprise journalism in the large category. Again, this is another Flash package. Whoops. And again, what you see here are some of the same ideas that you see in Winners Today. The execution just happened to be different, the technology happened to be different, but the journalism and the journalistic thinking is very consistent. So in this case, this was a primer on what is torture. This was during the rather ridiculous, in my opinion, debate over whether the United States was torturing Al-Qaeda captives, or if it was just enhanced interrogation techniques. And Slate, which is somewhat of a left-leaning organization, was basically like, it's torture, here's why. And the one that I'm bringing up here is that they went and got source material, and they got the memos and other documents from the United States, from the Attorney General's office, from the military, sort of saying, in this case, this is sort of an infamous memo from a lawyer named John Yoo, who was very creative, if you will, in defining why what the United States was doing was not torture and why it was okay. And they got the original, or they got copies anyway, of the memos and posted all those memos and source documents online. So this is a great example of what you now have with Document Cloud, Scribble Live, not Scribble Live.
Script.
Yeah, Scribd. What these places, the efforts that journalists were taking and what these organizations managed to bring to life. So you can click through here and really get a lot of that material. It's a terrific page even now. Similarly, this was The Smoking Gun in 2006, one for investigative journalism. Some of you may or may not be familiar with a book called A Million Little Pieces, written by an author named James Fry, who became famous when Oprah had him on the show and hawked his book, picked his book on the Oprah Book Club. It sold millions of copies, and The Smoking Gun did what many places did not do, which was fact check what he was saying he had done, including being a part of this, causing, I think, this train crash that killed 2 people, and anyway. And they went back and looked at all the police reports and all the original documents and said, this guy's a fraud and a complete liar. And Oprah actually looked quite bad in this. Again, it's getting source documents. It's actually...
Oprah is a major talk show, TV talk show.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'm assuming you know who Oprah is. Oprah Winfrey. Okay. So in any event, this was, I think, another example of using the platform to provide context, additional context through additional content and source material to help support the journalism in a way that, is obviously really hard. If this was a TV broadcast, they might have an image of a document and highlight a passage, but here you can actually go and read all the original documentation yourself. This is a flash package. This is from Geo Reportage, which is a French entity. I'm not sure if it's...
Originally German, I think. It's a major
is it?
publishing, okay. It's a magazine published by a major German house.
Oh, okay.
With international edition.
Oh, okay, so this must have just been the French edition. But you'll see kind of a similar theme developing here. Although this is entirely in Flash, again, and especially on the side here, you can see all of the additional content and the non-linear way that all the content is built together that really fleshes out the journalism that is a part of this project. It's not an especially visual one, but it has a lot of content, a lot of pieces, a lot of the underlying journalism that supports this package. And so we start to move into what I'm going to call the modern OJAs. So around 2009, there was a website that for a while I think was doing some of the best work on the web. Their top people have now been dispersed into some of the big news organizations, and they're doing great work there now too. And this was the Las Vegas Sun. It was kind of this remarkable dream team of young web smarty pants people who just did fabulous work. And this is one of my favorites. This is a look at when Las Vegas will run out of water. It'll run out of water in about 2,000 days, so go now. And what this presentation is, it's a little bit hard to see in a static way, but it's actually, the whole thing is a video story. But it's a video story with other context built in with time code moments. And so if you play this, as the video plays, this map begins to move. And so each scene in the video, you see where that video is taken. The more info tells you where, gives you more information about what you're looking at. Now, one could make a reasonable argument that there's actually too much happening on this page to take it in all at once, and that's a reasonable thing. But I thought it was quite an innovative project that just really advanced the way that media could start being brought together. So this was no longer this idea of we're going to punch a hole and just have some nonlinear story. This is actually a fairly linear story, but with a lot of different things happening to give you additional context and information. I thought it was a very smart package. And this one won investigative journalism in 2009, the Chauncey Bailey project. Chauncey Bailey was an independent reporter in Oakland who had been looking into a bakery that was assumed to be sort of a home for criminal activity. And he was investigating it and was killed pretty clearly by the operators of the organization, of this bakery. And so a bunch of reporters said, well, you're not going to stop journalism by killing a reporter. You're going to, all you're going to do is get a lot more reporters onto the story. There's a bit of a precedent for this. This is actually how investigative reporters and editors started with a similar thing in Arizona back in the 70s, I believe. And so this was a project that really dug into, okay, what happened? And they got footage from the murder, some video surveillance footage, and really dug into this. In fact, this was actually run by a woman named Dory Maynard, who unfortunately just died about a month ago. But again, you start to see this is now an entire web page, not just a multimedia whole punched out, that really starts bringing in a timeline of the evidence, other stories linking to this, the ability to connect to other people who are happening. And so this was a living website that continued to investigate both what he had been looking into and his death. Really quite powerful. One of the categories that's a little bit hard to talk about in this context is general excellence, websites that are just overall doing a fabulous job. And so this is one that won ONI, is that how you, I presume?
OVNI.
OVNI. French website, it won General Excellence Small in 2010. And there's actually enough here to look at. If you go back and remember, I know that's only, 4 years ago does not, or 5 years ago does not seem that long ago, but 5 years ago, most organizations didn't have, most news websites did not have comments on their pages, and yet they did. They, well, I should actually put a caveat. This is a current screenshot, so it's not exactly the screenshot it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. But you can see here they're doing some very smart things about engaging with readers through social media. If we kind of set the clock back 5 years, connecting people through newsletters and through RSS, making it bilingual and being able to switch on the fly, being able to sort of click through stories very easily, not have to, kind of in a more of a tablet kind of way. So really, again, thinking about how people can connect, how people use news and information that's really of the platform, and not simply taking stories that are from some other platform and just pasting it right online.
And it's perhaps worth mentioning that OVNI, they were among the first news organizations in Europe to do any data journalism at all. I mean, they were really pioneers in that field also.
Fantastic. Student journalists do terrific work, and we want to honor that. This was a winner in 2011 from Medill, looking at global warming. I believe, I'm not 100% sure of this, but I believe this is actually just built on a WordPress template. So you don't have to have, some fancy pants technology that, you can just use off-the-shelf free WordPress tools and customize it to do the job you need it to do. And here again, you can see engagement with video and with interactivity. They created a game here that helps you try and solve the global warming problem, or at least, maybe that's overstating it. What I mean is to gain insight into the challenges global warming poses and how it can be solved through, action and so on. I wish they just solved it. Conversation. So conversation is both what people are saying about it and then engaging with them as well. So hitting all these different ideas, not just, this isn't just, best community journalism or best video. It's really all of that together that really undergirds journalism. Having said that, we did for a while have a community collaboration category unto its own, and the Tiziano project won for that year. And what they did here is they went out and got shot videos with, I think, hundreds of different people to tell their individual stories, and then collected them in ways that you could sort of gather them and go through them and create your own path. Again, this is really not just saying, hey, community, come and comment on our stories, but we are going to engage with you and make you a part of the journalism itself. And I think that they did a great job of this, so much so that we realized after this category, and they won, that community really needed to be part of every category and not just some thing unto itself. And the same was true with the online video. I happen to be a judge on this particular one, and it is one of the most compelling, one of the things as a judge, when you go through a project, and there's a lot of great work out there, and you're thinking, how can I possibly choose one thing versus another? And one way that I would resolve that is when I realized I was on a project and I didn't want to leave it. Like, I wanted to keep going, and I sort of had to stop because I couldn't spend that much time on it, and this was one of them. I was so engrossed in this story, or these stories, that hours went by, and I thought, I cannot spend hours on this. I have like 30 more I have to look at. But it won because it was so tremendous. Now, it won for online video, but it had fabulous photography and other ways of engaging with the content. And again, this was an example where we realized it's not the video that we're honoring. What it is, it's the journalism that happens to use video as a primary medium, but it uses other things as well. So let's get away from honoring video or text or photography, and let's instead focus on journalism of this category. And then whatever they choose to do it, however they choose to do it, if it's compelling, if it's powerful, if they're making use of the platform, if they're making the right decisions, then it should win. And this really was a tremendous one. In 2011, I think it may have been earlier, we created this technical innovation category. In 2012, it was won by Storify. And the technical innovation was recognizing that as the platform matures, that there are things happening, often not even by journalists, that are making an impact on the lives of digital journalism. Storify was one example of that. How many of you are familiar with Storify? Okay, about maybe a third, half of you. Storify is a tool created by Bert Herman, who actually was on the ONA Board for a couple of years. And I think he created it when he was a Knight Fellow at Stanford, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And basically what Storify did was a way to select pieces of social media. I believe it started just with Twitter, but I think it then expanded to other pieces, if I'm not mistaken. And you could then gather individual pieces of social media and assemble that as a story. So what he was doing wasn't journalism per se, right? He was creating a tool that journalists could then use to bring together this media that otherwise was kind of difficult for them to wrap their arms around. And so this won as a technical innovation in the technical innovation category because it really was a new tool in the toolbox that empowered journalists to tell better stories, more compelling stories.
It even became a verb, to storify.
Did it?
Right? I mean, in Italian we have a noun. Il mio storify, my storify. Wow. I did a storify on this.
Wow. Well, if you've created if you've made a noun in multiple languages, you've really accomplished something. And Bert did. This is really terrific. Last year, the winner was, of all things, I love this actually. They were the only news organization that would possibly give an award to a JavaScript library. D3 won last year, and I think that is the coolest thing. Can you imagine a Pulitzer going to a JavaScript library? That's crazy. I love that. So I mentioned that in 2012, we sort of simplified our categories. And so one of the things that we did, and kind of looking back and recognizing what the content we were getting really was, one of the things we realized is that there was a whole category of explanatory journalism, and we hadn't had this category before. And it wasn't just a feature story, it wasn't just a breaking news, but it was really explaining a concept or explaining something. I think actually, coming up with this category, I should personally get a share of Vox.com's IPO whenever that happens, but I suspect that probably won't. In any event, one of the first winners was this New York Times project looking at conductors. So this is obviously not breaking news, right? You could make an argument that it's feature, But what they're really doing is explaining what a conductor does with the baton as they're waving their hands. And this was marvelous. And this could not be done. I mean, I suppose there's a way that television could partly do this, but they would pair the music and they'd have interviews, and then they create this animation, and you could follow the baton going along. You can't see on this page, but there's then text and there's other elements that really help explain what the conductor is doing, and you walk away with an understanding that I don't think you could have gotten any other way.
Just step in. Gli italiani presenti hanno capito di che stiamo parlando qua o c'è qualche problema? Okay, let's go ahead.
All right. I second that. This one a couple years ago, and I mentioned it for a couple of reasons. The New York Times, it's very easy to look at them and say, boy, they're doing great work, and gosh, they should win, and I can't possibly compete with the New York Times. Well, this was created, and there's a reason why the New York Times, there's a large category, and the New York Times is in that. But there's a reason why we have other categories too. And in the small category, a couple of years ago, we gave the award to Iran Election Watch. This was created by 2 or 3 people. It was, again, created on WordPress, so it was very easy for them to set it up. And what they did was, and of course, it just happens the screenshot is them touting the fact that they won. But it was something that I don't think was really possible anywhere else. And they covered the Iranian election of that year, and they had explanations of who all the candidates were, history on all of the elections, profiles on the different candidates, regular news updates on what was happening. It really was a way to take advantage of what the internet provides and the connection it's able to have and get out beyond censors and reach people all over the world, and to cover the Iranian election. They bring social media in through Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. So they really, use the entire ecosystem. It's not super fancy. It's not, it's not animated gesture to, conductor music and all that. It's just solid journalism that was done online using freely available tools and being really smart about it. And they deserve to win, and they did. Excuse me. Yes, yeah, that's a great question. So for some time, we based small, medium, and large on the number of page views that the organizations had, but we realized that was not a great barometer, because you could be one person and you happen to create something that's incredibly, popular. So we based it on the number of employees the organization has. Obviously, an organization with 1,000 employees has vastly more resources than an organization with 3, and so that's what we did. It raises it creates some challenges in how exactly you count if they're using freelancers and so on. But
or when you have collaborative projects.
Yeah, in that case we combine. It's the combined staffs. We have an investigative data journalism category. This was a really powerful story called Deadly Delays, looking at how a delay in care of babies just after they're born is a life or death situation, and unfortunately, it's the care is not equal across all people. So there are certain groups that where the care comes later, and certain groups where the care comes earlier, and it has really significant consequences. And so this was a series of stories, an explanation of how screening works, individual stories of all these babies, links to all the other stories, a real compendium of content that they looked into this, they used data, they told these stories with interactive charts and graphs, and really brought home what was going on. And I believe that it had an impact on changing some of the processes in Milwaukee. So something, again, really deserved to win. I mentioned also landslide in Seattle. Again, you can see a little bit more of some of the content they have there. A lot of different ways to engage with the content. Again, how the whole website is being used to do this. Which actually brings up another point. I guess I sort of mentioned it earlier. which is we've begun looking at how the digital journalism is being applied across platforms. So not just on the desktop, but tablet and mobile, and bringing that in. Performant was the word the person used. If it's mobile performant, which is something I hadn't heard before, but I have now. This was another one, and I love this because it's so creative. This one for explanatory reporting is created by the European Journalism Center on Rebuilding Haiti. And I think this is a great example.
And one of the authors is, by the way, here in Perugia, and he presented the project this morning in this very room.
Oh, did he? Oh,
yeah.
Terrific, terrific. Well, for good reason. This is what I would call, it's I think probably the next wave, which is full screen storytelling. So here you have this animation, you scroll through it, the entire web browser is telling you this story. It's not just part of one column or a hole punched out into the middle. It is telling you this whole thing. It's broken up into these chapters. It animates you through the story. You can switch between English and French. It is a truly of the platform kind of project. And what we're seeing now is the maturation of online journalism from taking something that was quite good, was the Concorde crash from 2001, where every piece is sort of, here's an element, and click on this to get a different element, and click on this to get a different element, to now all integrated together in one cohesive, multimedia platform kind of presentation. So really terrific. All right, so this year, if you're interested, now this is the—
You should.
Please be. This is tentative, but at the moment, we are planning to open entries on May 5th. The deadline for entries will be May 29th. We plan to announce the finalists on August 4th, and then the winners will be announced at our conference in Los Angeles on September 26th. I hope you come to the conference. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of people there. It's not quite as beautiful as Perugia, but hopefully the weather in LA will at least be similar. You can get more information at awards.journalist.org. Full categories, full rules, entry, all that will be posted there shortly. And you can also, again, go to that bit.ly link if you want to sign up to be a screener. I'm especially looking for people who are multilingual, unlike me. So, if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
I think there is, abbiamo tempo per un paio di domande ancora, sì.
Couple minutes.
Couple of minutes. A couple of questions. Domande, prego, questions. I'll be glad to translate any Italian questions into English. Sono pronto a tradurre domande in italiano e in inglese.
I was that thorough, huh? Come on.
Tu?
Surely there's a question.
No.
All right, well, if you're just being shy, you're welcome to, Jeff.
Oh, here, e qua, grazie.
We have a winner.
Well, maybe it's a bit difficult question for me anyway. There's a difference between categories and criteria, and I hear you talking about categories, and then you had a lot of categories, and then you try to make them simple.
Yeah.
And then you have the categories, but what are the criteria of giving the award?
Yes, so...
is it a journalistic criterion, or is it...
Well, this is a journalism award.
Yeah, it's definitely...
It's always...
Yeah, no, but you're asking, I think, a question that often our judges wrestle with, which is how much of it is journalistic and how much of it is platform, if you will. And the reality is it's a balance, right? I mean, it has to be journalism, it has to be good journalism. It could be the greatest journalism in the, let me put it this way, it could win a Pulitzer and not win an OJA. If it doesn't take advantage of the platform in any way, if it's not doing that, it won't win an OJA, even though it could be a great story. That said, without the journalism, it won't win an OJA either, right? So, so there is a kind of a balance that we try to strike there. In terms of categories versus, I forget the criteria, right? So there's sort of two categorization techniques. There's sort of what the content is. So is it, for example, is it a feature story, or is it a breaking news story, or is it on explanatory, or is it sort of investigative journalism, as well as the size of the organization. And so we use those, when you're entering, you're kind of making those choices, which categories to enter. The criteria, by and large, there are some specific criterion that are used for specific categories, but by and large, the criteria is high quality journalism that is that really maximizes or takes advantage of the digital platform and how it's able to bring together different types of media, community, interactivity to best tell the story, to do the best journalism. So it's that marriage there. Does that answer? Okay. Yes.
Una domanda ancora qua? Sì, il microfono arriva.
La faccio in italiano perché il mio inglese è pessimo.
No, non c'è problema. Comunque va bene, ok, d'accordo.
Sono arrivato tardi, però da quello che ho visto vorrei chiedere quanto delle cose abbiamo visto hanno la possibilità di entrare nella filiera editoriale normale, quanti di questi prodotti possono diventare, se si può usare questo termine, di routine all'interno della filiera di produzione delle notizie, della produzione editoriale.
All right, I'll translate that, and then perhaps also I have an answer to that.
You can do both.
He's asking how much of these products can actually become part of the regular routine products of any news organization. That's the question.
It's a great question, and what I would say is that all of it, and I think there's two ways that all of it can be done. There are some projects that are what I would call a one-off, right, where a group of people in the newsroom spend weeks, or maybe in rare cases, more than weeks, to put together something really spectacular. Snowfall comes to mind, right, from the New York Times, and I'm sure there are many other examples. That's hard for many places to do. It's hard for many places to justify giving 3 or 4, 5, 6 people that much time to go do something. However, I think it can be justified and worth it if the product is not simply the project that comes out of it, but is pieces that then other people can use and then continue with. So the New York Times, for example, maybe not so much with Snowfall, but with other packages, might create one spectacular thing and then create more or less a template that many others are able to use to follow that up, and that becomes then a standard. So the way I would look at it is it's a bit like a car company that makes a really special car that many people aren't going to buy, and they're going to sell it for a lot of money, and they only make a few of them. But the technology that they come up with to create that car then propagates to all the other lines that they have in the that they sell. And that's, I think, the key to making these types of things. The one other thing I'll mention is, and we talk about this a lot at work, we have a few people who do special things on a few stories, but what we really try to prioritize are the people who can touch 1,000 pages or 10,000 pages by continually advancing the platform. And that then everybody is able to take advantage of that. So those are the two ways that I think these sorts of things can be done by anybody, and it has that impact.
All right, and closing down, because since we have to hand over the room to the next session, a partial answer to this question on my part. I addressed this answer to mostly what Italians are in the audience right now. Now, in this country, there is this misconception that online is for breaking news, shallow information, all right? And whatever you need in terms of deep information and you will find elsewhere, mostly in print. Now, this just simply shows you that you can do, really meaningful, lasting, as far as the platform allows, information online. Much better, actually, than with other media. Thanks.